Access to Democracy and other BECT programming is supported by West, a Thomson Reuters business. Westlaw books and online tools serve the professionals in America and around the world. West is proud to support Minnesota employees, their families, and their communities since 1872. U.S. Federal Credit Union, a not-for-profit financial cooperative serving the greater Twin Cities community with new branches in Shakopee, Lakeville, Brooklyn Center, and Brooklyn Park. Waldelin Jewelry and Gifts, a local independent jeweler serving the community with custom designs and repairs since 1976.
And welcome once again to Access to Democracy. I'm your host, Alan Miller, and with us today is candidate in District 36A, seeking a seat in the legislature, first-time candidate Colin Lee. And Colin, welcome.
Thank you, Alan. I'm glad to be here.
Now, you are running on the Independence and Green Party lines, or actually you're a Green Party candidate who got endorsed also by the Independence Party.
Yes, that's correct.
So you're the only candidate in that district with two lines.
That's right.
And you have an incumbent Republican representative, correct?
Yes, she's been there for 10 years now.
Okay. Now, you went to St. Thomas High School.
St. Thomas Academy, yes, in Mendota Heights.
And then University of Florida, but along the way you were a National Merit Scholar.
That's right.
And now you're working for Cray?
I'm a software engineer, yes, for Cray Research.
Software engineers seem to be in big demand these days.
Oh, yeah.
So what made you decide to run for the legislature?
Well, honestly, I've been involved in politics for over 10 years now, often going to the legislature and volunteering, taking a day off of work. But what I found out was that it was getting tougher and tougher to really influence the people who I was talking to, because there are more and more corporate influences coming in and paying large amounts of money to get the legislator to take their view. And finally, the last straw was when the I-35W bridge collapsed. My fiance almost happened to be on that bus. In fact, she was considering it that week, so I was very afraid when I saw the bridge go down. I felt it was a big failure of government.
And failure of state government, federal government, what?
I would say state government. I think that it shows that we've been, instead of investing in infrastructure in recent years, we've been investing too much into all these special favors for businesses that have been investing in our representatives.
Well, we know that there's a conservative representative who's been there for 10 years. Where do you differ from the Democratic candidate?
Well, the Democratic candidate hasn't been taking, I would say, the views that would really help people out right now. I mean, the biggest issue I find on the street everyone's talking about is health care and the economy. He's not pushing a single-payer plan, a plan which would provide Medicare for all Minnesotans, a single plan. He's not pushing a plan which would, for the economy, which I believe would bring us out of this mess. We need to bring jobs in for these people, and the best way to do it is to fix the health care mess, so that companies come to Minnesota.
So what are the things that you see as the big issues that you are directing your campaign towards?
Well, I mentioned healthcare. Another one that's major for me is energy, because I spent many years trying to work on energy in the legislature. There's a lot of very good solutions we have, wonderful alternatives.
In the legislature, in what capacity?
As a volunteer who's there to speak with the representatives. I'd take a day off work 2 or 3 times a year, go down to the legislature, meet with their representatives. I mean, anyone can do it, but it takes time, and it takes a work day. Yeah.
Okay, so we have energy, we have health care.
Transportation. Obviously, our roads and bridges are falling apart. They've shut down several bridges this year because of the fact that they found the same problem that happened to the I-35W bridge. It wasn't isolated. So we're running into a place where we know that we're falling far behind in our transportation needs.
All of this, of course, takes a lot of money.
And it does.
Where does the money come from?
Well, I would like to say that there's a lot of places the money's going to have to come from. It's not an easy answer. I can't tell you that. But first off, we're going to have to do some cutting, and I think that's going to have to come from the pork. I mean, the situations where we know that there's wasteful spending. Another thing,
for instance,
I think, well, not a pork example, but I think one thing that could be done better is that we spend way too much money right now trying to build new prisons, even though we have 20% of the people in there are just nonviolent drug offenders. I think it would be better if we put them into treatment programs that were a little more affordable than $37,000 per year per inmate, which is what we spend in the state.
And a treatment program would cost how much for a nonviolent drug offender?
Well, obviously it depends on how much time you spend with the treatment. You know, if it's, I think the fact is you don't have to put them in there the full year in a treatment program. You can have them on an intensive program and hopefully get them off the juice, so to speak. But another source I would go for is a carbon tax. I believe that there have been a lot of irresponsible industries which don't fully understand that there's a real need right now to use energy more efficiently.
What about education?
Education is a major priority. I don't think the best solution to it is to spend lots of money on it. I think the best solution is to fix the way that we handle our classroom management. Have the administrators do more observations of their classes. Because right now, it seems that what happens in public schools too often is that the teachers get into a pattern where they lose the techniques they learned in school, where they're not working with each other as a team to build on the good teaching techniques they once had. It's not that the failure is purely in spending. But we do strongly need better programs for English language learners. That's going to cost money. I would like to see more early childhood education. That costs money. And these things, like I said, are going to have to come with a lot of shifting of the budget.
Well, that's really what I want to get at.
Yeah.
Where are we going to shift? I mean, according to your online priorities, we've talked about energy, we've talked about transportation, we've talked about education, we've talked about health care. The economy, you want to create meaningful jobs and pay living wages, which is admirable. Stop foreclosures, fairness in taxation, balance all budgets, treat veterans fairly, and you've seen corruption and waste in government.
Absolutely.
So where have you seen corruption and waste?
Well, obviously corruption, you look at the per diems and what they did 2 years ago. A lot of people have no idea because our media didn't really cover this. But what happened was the per diems are the spending money for travel and gas, which are given to the representatives.
You're talking about the daily amount that each legislature gets for his or her time in session.
Right. It's not their pay, but it's actually their reimbursement for food and gas.
Do you call that corruption?
No, the corruption is that they changed the law so that they could take it every day of the year without using any receipts. That they actually increased the amount, they made it every day of the year, and they used it as a pay increase, which was against the Constitution of Minnesota, which had in place a rule that you couldn't raise your pay any sooner than 2 years out because you have to let an election occur between the time you increase your pay and the time it takes effect.
Well, do you have any indication that there are people who are falsely billing in terms of their per diems?
Well, obviously, if they don't need receipts, you can't prove anything, but you can show the numbers, and the numbers are published on the Pioneer Press website.
Corruption is a serious word in a state where we have some pretty conscientious legislators.
Oh, I agree. There are some very conscientious legislators.
So that, you know, I don't think it's a word that we should banty about really without some sort of an allegation or some substance to back it up.
I understand that, and I believe that there's a lot of gray areas where legislators are being constantly pulled here and there by forces which I think can turn a good person towards doing the wrong thing. The fact is they're surrounded by lobbyists all the time. We have the most lobbyists per capita of any state in the country, and those lobbyists, the reason they pay so many in Minnesota is because it has a lot of effect. They know that they get their money's worth out of each of the lobbyists they hire.
You think that the lobbyists really have an effect on turning legislators' votes?
Absolutely they do. I believe, first of all, they're the first person that the legislator listens to because there's not a lot of citizens who are really involved in the way that I try to be. I can't compete 3 days a year with, hundreds of lobbyists.
But legislators go back to their districts, they talk they have listening sessions, they talk to their constituents, they appear at public forums, they have people contacting them at their homes.
Right.
They have people who are emailing them today. They have people who are calling their offices on various issues. So it's not as though they're in a glass cage someplace.
They're not in a glass cage, but they do have this ever-present people, who are there the whole time they're working. These are their work buddies, are the lobbyists. And it's not that they're bad people. I think people generally go into politics for good reasons, and they want to make the world a better place. But the lobbyists tell them how the world works, and they start to change their worldview to reflect what the lobbyist tells them.
So you refuse to, if you're elected, will you refuse to deal with lobbyists?
I refuse to accept money from lobbyists. I believe that I have to hear their point of view, like anyone else.
Well, there are a lot of legislators who don't accept money from lobbyists, but they will talk to them.
Oh, yeah.
So what's
I'm not
the difference there?
Well, the incumbent in my case has taken lots of money from lobbyists in her past elections, just taken 55, 60% from PACs and lobbyists, directly in some cases.
In what varieties of petroleum?
With Petroleum PAC gave her $250. Doesn't sound like a lot of money, but in the state legislative race it is. You've got the Truckers PAC, you've got the Dentist PAC. She's taken money from at least 4 or 5 others, which I can't remember off the top of my head.
And
just this election.
Total of $55,000 in this election.
55%, I said.
Oh, 55%.
That was in her last election. I don't have the latest figures because they only publish them after the election's over, really.
Don't you have to periodically publish?
Oh yeah, prior to the
contributions.
Prior to the primary, she put some numbers up, and she took from the Petroleum PAC, Dentist PAC, Truckers PAC, and a few others.
And truckers are generally looking for better roads, are they not?
Well, they are, but I don't think she's been providing those. In fact, she's been the biggest stonewall to any kind of real, transportation reform and putting roads in place.
Where did she sit on the transportation bill?
She sat against the bill to try to spend more money on the to do the tax increase. Now, I don't know how they're going to come up with the money without a tax increase. I'm not a big fan of the gas tax increase because it's regressive, and I stand for fairness in taxation. But I think that if you balance it out, I think it could have been fair. And I think that
you're against the gas tax increase.
I'm for some kind of a tax increase in order to fund our roads. But I think
the gas tax hasn't gone up since 1988,
right?
Which places us about 47th in the country in taxation, where there is a 2-cent raise and now a 3-cent raise, really, which is all directed toward the roads. And you oppose that?
No, I said that I'm for not for regressive taxation. So I think we want to balance that out with more progressive taxation.
People are really being hit in their property taxes also.
That's regressive as well. I think we need to fix that.
How do we fix it?
How do we fix it? For example, I said the carbon tax, it tends to be more progressive. I would balance out the income tax more. I think it's hitting really hard. The bottom decile is paying double what the top decile is paying right now in overall state taxes and fees.
You're saying that top 1 or 2% should be paying more than their fair share?
They're paying less than their fair share right now. They're not paying their percentage.
They're paying more. I mean, they're paying less than they should be, rather than their fair share. Excuse me.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Well, really, the person who was responsible for that is somebody whose endorsement you accepted, though, Jesse Ventura. Isn't that so?
Well, Jesse Ventura, certainly he tried to lower income taxes, and some of the fees ended up going up.
But what he lowered was really a big break for the top wage earners in the state. If we, in fact, didn't have that, we wouldn't have been running into some of the deficits that we ran into.
Yeah.
And yet you didn't reject his endorsement.
I didn't reject his endorsement because it's an endorsement of third parties and the fact that we need to move forward with a new kind of reform in this country right now. We need people who are willing to step up there and say, I'm not going to take the dirty money. I'm going to try to run a campaign that's clean, no negative campaigning, try to make it something that reflects what the citizens want, and be bold about it. Do what the real healthcare reform that has to happen in order to bring jobs into this state.
So we start the next session of the legislature.
Correct.
Colin Lee is there representing 36A.
Yeah.
We start with a minimum of $2 billion as a budget deficit.
Correct.
We have all these items that you want to put your attention to. How do we pay for universal health care, wind energy. I don't know what it is on elections, fair elections. I think we have those in this state myself. Education, transportation, create meaningful jobs, end foreclosures, fairness in taxation, which we just talked about, balancing the budgets, treat the veterans fairly, and corruption and waste. So let's go right to waste. What's the waste that we can use? We're $2 billion in the hole, and you want to go after waste. Where is it?
Well, one thing you can do is improve our bidding processes. I think that in some cases it seems like they've gone for bidders that aren't necessarily the best. I've seen this in some areas, especially with highways. The bridge is a clear example, but that's federal.
Don't they normally take the lowest bidder?
They sometimes.
Aren't they mandated to take the lowest bidder?
Not always.
When I say they, the legislature, unless there is a problem, some sort of a record that a bidder has.
That's the way the government is supposed to work, but if they write the bid around the person they want it to go to, then obviously the lowest bidder will end up being the one they want it to go to.
So then that problem would be in the administration.
Correct.
So you have problems with the Pawlenty administration in that regard?
Yes, I do.
Okay. That's one small area of waste. Where are these other areas that are going to
Healthcare is probably the biggest area of waste. Right now we spend 15% of U.S. GDP on healthcare. Japan, which has arguably a better healthcare system in terms of actual results, they have the much lower infant mortality, so some of the best life expectancies in the world, they spend only 7%, so that's less than half of what we spend, and everyone is covered, and they have better, they end up doing more procedures. They actually have
the whole world, the whole industrialized world has universal health care.
Yeah.
Not just Japan,
no, I know,
but even Europe and Northern European, Scandinavian countries, where they pay perhaps $90 a year and then everything else is covered. Canada is another example. There's no question that our healthcare system really, to put it bluntly, stinks. But what do we do to improve it?
What do we do to improve it? Obviously, we have to take the layers out that are just costing a lot of money and not providing a service. The underwriters, the reinsurance, the reinsurance brokerages, the insurance companies. And we need to put them into a place where we can actually provide health care and the money goes towards provides a dollar of care. That's what we need. And that's going to provide enormous savings for this state. If we can have a single healthcare system, put it on separate premiums, not take it out of the general fund.
Single payer.
Yes.
Like Medicare.
Like Medicare, but different because we'd keep it separate from the state budget. It wouldn't be in a general fund where people could rate it. We don't want to become like Canada where they end up taking all the money out of the fund and you end up with substandard care.
Well, some states have actually provided full care.
Yeah.
Full coverage, I should say. Which one of those states do you think has a good program?
I don't think the United States has yet gotten to that point where they've really come up with a good program. I think we have to look overseas, look at not just one country, but several countries to get the best
But there are some states in the United States that are providing full coverage now.
I don't think
Massachusetts, for instance?
I don't believe that Massachusetts has done a very good job. What we've seen is that their healthcare costs have increased dramatically by as much as 10% per year. And the reason why is because they're all mandated to take HMO coverage. And in fact, over 50% of the people who are receiving government assistance to buy medical care were turning it down and having to pay a fine because of it, because of the fact that they don't want to buy a $4,000 deductible plan that they can't use. They don't spend $4,000 in health care in a year. What use is a health care plan if you're not going to be able to use it? That's the problem that the United States has, is our healthcare solutions don't fix the problem. They don't attack the root cause. And that's really, I think, one of the fundamental problems with government right now, is that we don't attack root causes. We go after the easy fish to fry.
Education. Obviously, take a lot of money to fix our educational system. We have grammar schools where there are 40 kids in a class. We have grammar schools that are using scientific books, science books and biology books that are 20, 25 years old that don't even cover the advances that have been made in those areas. How can we improve that system?
Well, it doesn't take a lot of money to buy biology books. There is actual waste in education, and I know I've seen it in My fiance, of course, is a school teacher, and when she was teaching, she saw cases where they were spending $1 million just to provide buffet lunches for the parents and things, and huge grants. So I mean, there are cases where education could be improved spending-wise, but I think fundamentally it needs an increase. It doesn't need a huge increase, but it needs better English language instruction. That's an area where Minnesota has been weak because we've never had to do it in the past. Better special ed programs, because autism is taking off. There's actually an epidemic of autism, if you believe that.
Okay, so we have to put more money into education.
Yeah.
We have this $2 billion deficit.
Correct.
And maybe we're going to get a little bit of a break on changing bidding procedures. Mm-hmm. We're talking about billions of dollars. Where is the rest of this money coming from as we're trying to balance the budget, which is what you aim to do, and that certainly is admirable.
I'm very aware of the amount of the deficit and how significant that is in a $40+ billion budget.
It may be even more than two.
They're saying 2 to 3.
Based on what's happening to the economy right now, maybe closer to 3.
Yeah. Well, I believe, and you went down the list of reforms I want to make, at least 3 or 4 of those lower costs. They don't increase them, or they keep them the same. Ending foreclosures, for example, it doesn't cost any money. Putting moratorium on foreclosures, it costs the bank money, not the government.
Now, can the state do that on its own, put a moratorium on it? Is that on the aegis of the federal government?
That's a state issue. The state can absolutely push a moratorium. They tried to pass one this year, and they came very, very close. It came right down to the wire. And in fact, it's not just the moratorium. I think people don't understand that it's in favor of the banks to do a moratorium on foreclosures because they lose money every time they foreclose.
There's no question about that. Yeah. And then people are out of their homes, and then people are looking for a place to live, and then people end up on the welfare rolls.
That's right.
And people sometimes also lose their jobs, and unemployment is spiraling upward, including in this state for one of the first times in history. But the bottom line is all of this takes money. Well, that's an area that certainly is one worth exploring. I agree with you.
In fact, it provides money, because if people end up out of work, out of their homes, and on the welfare rolls, they're not providing a tax base. People don't realize sometimes the function of government isn't to just increase the tax so that you can pay for things. It is to increase the tax base so that you can actually have enough jobs that everyone is able to provide enough for themselves and for everyone around them, so that we're all living in this world together, and we have to make it right. I mean, I believe in sustainability and efficiency in government, and I think that the sustainable route here is to stop the foreclosures, renegotiate the mortgages, and write down the cost of those loans so that the people are able to pay them. And if we do that, the banks will make more money, and the government will make more money, because the people will be happy in their homes, needing to pay a mortgage and having to work a job that pays taxes.
Okay, but we're still talking about billions of dollars and looking for places to cut. Now, transportation, we know that our roads and bridges in this state need probably $2 billion
That's right.
to be brought up to par. You oppose the increase in the gas tax.
I didn't say I oppose it. I said that I want to balance out the regressiveness of it.
Well, if you had been in the legislature, would you have voted for it or against it?
I would have amended it. I would have amended it to put in some extra tax credits for people who are unable to afford the increased tax prices, or gas prices. I would have probably put in...
Where do we get the other money for transportation?
Well, first of all, like I said, I strongly support a carbon tax, and I believe that that would provide about $0.5 to $1 billion. It might get us halfway there. I wouldn't put that on cars for these poor people who are already struggling with the gas tax. I believe that would be double dipping the gas tax. I believe we need to put it on to these heavy industries that are polluting a lot and don't really have any incentive right now to decrease. I mean, the fact is, it's more efficient for them to actually bring down their carbon output. But because it's easier for them to go with their cheap equipment for many, many years, they don't want to do it.
Do you favor nuclear energy?
No, I do not. I believe nuclear is terribly inefficient, money-wise.
Do you favor clean coal processing?
Clean coal doesn't exist yet. It's not. It's there. It's a scientific theory, and it's something that hasn't really been proven on a large scale. I think that the thing is that there are much better routes than clean coal.
Well, that throws us back on petroleum.
I believe wind power is going to be the future of Minnesota.
Well, there's no question. Minnesota is probably third or fourth in capacity.
That's right.
For wind power. It also costs a lot of money to get each one of those towers up and windmills going. Where does that money come from?
Well, obviously, the energy companies are going to want to do some of it, but you're going to have to invest into that, and it's not there's no easy answer. But the fact is, putting up a nuclear power plant is 3 to 4 times what you're going to pay for putting up the wind turbine, and over the 25-year of the wind turbine, it's going to cost less. It's going to cost less than some of the traditional methods they've been using, like natural gas and coal. They've been proving that lately, that it's actually dropped below coal, which is amazing.
Have you seen in some of the countries in Europe the way they have utilized wind power?
It's amazing. In Spain, they've got a place where they have over 70% of their energy in one area of Spain coming from wind and solar, and it works really well together because when there's not a lot of wind, the sun tends to be out. It's not as cloudy, and vice versa.
In the few minutes that we have left, and we only have a couple, what about healthcare costs, pharmaceutical costs, things like that?
Yeah, well, pharmaceutical.
What can we do there?
Pharmaceutical costs are 13% of the cost of medicine. It's still significant, however, and a lot of that comes from drug marketing. I don't think we should have drug companies marketing directly to consumers because there's nothing scientific about the kind of marketing they're doing. They're just trying to market to our egos, not to our minds. So I believe that we need to cut down on the drug marketing. We should go with the tobacco-style laws. Tobacco being a controlled substance, just like prescription drugs, they can limit the television advertising on them.
Well, then you run into a free speech First Amendment problem, though.
That's
How do you
true.
overcome that?
Well, in the case of tobacco, there has been none. I mean, they've never won a free speech suit against the tobacco companies.
And you think that pharmaceuticals would be in the same situation?
I believe so. It's also a controlled substance. It's the same basic premise.
Well, pharmaceuticals, of course, help your health. Tobacco takes your health down the wrong path. So there's that to deal with also.
Correct.
There was proof that smoking endangers your health and costs more money, not necessarily with drugs, which can enhance and increase your lifespan.
But hundreds of thousands of people die every year from taking the wrong medications, and overdosing on their medications by accident. And it's not like controlled substances aren't without their own risks.
We got to wind it up.
Okay.
Colin Lee, running for 36A in the legislature, a very ambitious young man with a very ambitious program. Thank you for coming in and sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you so much for putting this on.